nervous about this video. Right. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Emmy, and this week I'm going to do something different. For those of you who don't know, that May is the month for mental health awareness, and it says that it's just in the States, so I'm not sure if it's like an international thing or what, but it doesn't matter. Essentially, this month, what I want to do on my channel for this week, starting today up until Friday, I want to upload videos that are talking about mental health. For me, that particular topic is something that I feel very passionate about, and it is something that I've kind of, in the last year, I've learned a lot about, and I have done some research about it and whatnot, because it's something that's become a little bit more real for me in the past year, even though I know that I've probably been dealing with this for longer than that, but you know. And I feel like it's a topic that, even though a lot of people have come forth and talked about it in like pop culture and people that have more of a platform, I still feel like there is somewhat of a stigma, somewhat of a taboo when these kind of things are brought up, because I know that there's still people out there who don't feel comfortable talking about these kind of things, and I feel like the more we talk about it, the more the conversation is out there, the more comfortable people will feel to talk about their issues and hopefully seek help. So that would be a great thing if something like that comes out of this week. If it doesn't, then that's fine. Essentially, the main purpose for this week is mainly for me to kind of reaffirm my knowledge. I feel like whenever I learn something, if I say it out loud, it kind of solidifies my knowledge of it. And it's also something for me to look back on in the future if I need to, and if I forget certain things, I can look back and be like, oh no, you know this. There's a lot of things that I'm going to talk about that are going to be very like me talking to me, like, take your own advice. So yeah, so that's my purpose essentially for these videos, is just to talk about it, put the conversation out there, shine some light on these kind of things, and hopefully have some people feel comfortable enough to open up a discussion and see what's what. So I wanted to start off, I have like notes and stuff here because I get very scatterbrained. I wanted to start off this week essentially by talking about my personal experience with mental health. So I have been, well, for like a year now, I was like actually diagnosed by a therapist, by a professional, with different kind of mental health issues. But it's not like a lot of the stuff that I go through is like a little bit of a lot. So I have like mild ADD, mild OCD, mild PTSD, mild depression, like some sort, well, I kind of have like, if depression is here, I have like a little like a branch of it here. But the main issue that I deal with is anxiety. Anxiety is something that I know I have dealt with for a very, very long time in my life. It hasn't been until recently that I've known exactly like how to pinpoint it, like to talk about it and to kind of recognize it when it's happening. But anxiety has been something that I've dealt with for a very long time. All the other stuff kind of, I believe that it might have stemmed from it. I'm not 100% sure. But all the other things that I deal with were kind of triggered by a specific event that happened in my life. And I'm pretty sure that it also has to do, I mean, I know that depression and that sort of thing comes more from like, can also come from like chemical imbalances, probably like not eating well. You probably don't have like proper vitamins in your body. I mean, I know that I'm like deficient in a whole bunch of shit, so meh. So yeah. a lot of people, it's actually really common for people after they reach a certain age, especially like on their 30s. And I feel like this is very true also for people in my generation. I was born in 1986, so I'm currently 32. Does that fall under millennials? I think so. Are we like the first batch of millennials? I've always been very confused about that whole concept of what a millennial is, but I feel like a lot of people from my generation at my age at this point of their life is that they're kind of realizing that they've had issues, and it's mainly because we, at least in my experience growing up, talking about things like being depressed or being sad about something equaled you being crazy, or people just being like, oh, you know, you're just lazy, you'll figure it out later. And it's always something that was kind of pushed away, kind of pushed aside, and nobody ever really like treated it or anything like that, because there were always other things that you had to take care of. Like, you couldn't stop and think about your mental health because, you know, you had to pay your bills, you had to work, you had to take care of kids if you have kids, or, you know, you're in the process of having kids, or, oh my God, I'm 20 something, I'm almost 30, I don't have kids, what is my life? So all those things happen between that time frame, and then once you reach this age where you're a little bit older and you kind of sit back and think about what happened in your life, you're kind of like, oh, well, maybe there was something there. And nowadays, it's a lot more common to talk about these things because of social media, because of the fact that other people have used their platform to talk about it. It's something that it's a little bit more in the limelight than it was before. So those of us like in my generation, or at least for me, I feel like now I'm kind of like, oh, okay, now I understand why these things happened previously. It's because of this and that. So to give some insight, when I tell people, I haven't really told a lot of people, but when I do tell people that I take medication or whatever for depression, I feel like the first thing that people think of is, but why are you sad? But what do you have to be sad about? I don't understand. What are you sad about? And it's like, well, I mean, first of all, it's 2018. There's a lot of shit to be sad about. But I don't think that my depression, first of all, I don't want to throw that word around because I don't want to make it seem, I don't want to glamorize anything. I don't want to romanticize anything. And also, let me preface this. I'm not an expert. I'm just a person who's dealing with something and has, you know, and has talked to professionals, a professional. So this is very much my experience and my view of things based off of what I go through. So let me just say that. But what I deal with, like, is not, I'm not a person that is constantly sad. Like, that's not how my depression and my anxiety manifest. I'm not someone who can't find joy in things, which is how a lot of people have their, like, experience their depression. My issue is mainly the reason why I was diagnosed with a mild depression or something like that is because of this heaviness that I felt in my body, or, well, it felt like it was in my body, but it was mainly up here. So, and a lot of people, and myself really, I also thought that maybe it was just laziness. Maybe I'm just a lazy person. But the reason why I knew that there was something wrong with that statement is because I don't want to be like that. Like, for example, I have always wanted to do this whole YouTube thing, right? I mean, for the people who know me, they've always told me, like, oh my God, you're always, you know, watching YouTube and watching these girls putting on makeup. Why don't you do it? Why don't you do it? Why don't you do it? And in the back of my head, I'm just like, I could. Like, why don't I just? But because of that kind of like sense of heaviness in my body, there was like that other part of me that was just like, it's so much easier not to. Just don't. don't get up. Don't do that thing that you want to do, because it's so much easier not to, you know? And I do want to make a video talking specifically about that voice. But essentially that was my issue. It was just, and it's still something that I still struggle with today, even with taking medication and whatnot. There are a lot of times where I still have to make a conscious effort to move around and to do things, because it's not just about, oh, that I'm just a lazy person and I'm a slob. It's just that there's just like this darkness, this heaviness that kind of comes into your mind, into my mind, and it's just like, yeah, you could get up and, you know, wash your hands, or, you know, wash the dishes, do something stupid, but you could also not, and you can just sit back and wallow in all of your self-pity and sadness, because that's so much easier to do, you know? And that is my form of depression. Like, that's how my depression has manifested itself, and kind of is a very internal thing, you know? It's very much something that only I experience and only I can feel. It's not something, none of the things that I deal with are things that are manifested externally, other than crying, which I do a lot. I am an easy crier. But other than that, I mean, I could be, you know, I could be feeling the shittiest ever. I could just have had an anxiety attack, and you will not know. You would not know unless I want you to know, unless I let you know. But it's something that is very much within myself. And I feel like that's the reality for most people who suffer from mental health issues, is that it's not something that you can see. It's not a physical thing. It's not something that you can touch or anything like that. It's something that's very internal, very personal. I think of it as a very selfish kind of disease, because only you can deal with it. You can't really let anyone else into it, because no one can really know exactly what you're feeling, no matter how much you try to explain it. Even if you explain it to someone else who has mental health issues, they wouldn't really know 100% how you're feeling, because everyone experiences everything in a very different manner. So with that being said, with those things that I deal with, I do take medication. I've always been really afraid of medication, because normally when people talk about meds, they talk about really powerful things like Prozac and Xanax, and what's another one? Well, there's a lot of other ones that are really popular. And I've always been scared about, you know, the issue of like, well, if you take this medication and you feel good, can you ever stop taking it? And what happens if you stop taking it? Does that mean that you're just going to go back down to, you know, that road? It's like, are you going to be forever imprisoned on this medication? And, you know, I'm lucky that I have insurance and I can pay for these things, but, you know, what happens if something happens, God forbid, you know, knock on wood, that I don't have that insurance and I can't afford it? So then what? Am I going to drive myself insane? Like, those kind of things always really, it still does worry me, and it scares me. But I felt that if I didn't medicate myself, if I didn't do something, if I didn't take another step other than just talking about it, then I was never going to be better or feel myself in a different way other than how I felt. Because I was going to therapy once a week. I was, you know, very diligent on everything that I was doing, but I would go and I would talk about how I was feeling, and I would have a really good conversation, but then I would just go home the next day and it was just like, you know, it was like nothing happened. You know, that other voice, that darkness was still there, very much, you know, saying whatever it said, and I still felt really bad. So like after a couple of months, I think maybe like 6 months into therapy. I'm not good with remembering time frames. That's when my doctor was like, well, maybe you should consider taking, because then on top of the whole depression thing, there were the other stuff that I also had to deal with, the ADD, which is so crazy because when I was younger, when I would hear about people having ADD, you would normally just think about kids, you know, or people in school. And it's just like, oh, someone who has ADD is like, again, the word crazy always gets thrown around. And it's like, oh, those are people who are insane, who can't seem to focus on something. But that is such a lie, because any regular person could have a form of ADD, like, and I wasn't aware of that. My issue was just that I can't focus on something, but it's not because something else is distracting me. It's just that my mind can't, like if I'm reading a book, I can read a book, but I'm reading it, and while I'm reading it, like my eyes gloss over and I start thinking about other stuff. And it's not necessarily that a TV or something distracted me. It's just me there reading. I just lose focus. Like my eyes glaze over and I'm gone. And I start daydreaming about other stuff. So those kind of things, you know, it's very subtle things that don't necessarily mean that you're going to go off the wall, bouncing off the walls, and you're a crazy person. But, you know, people don't want to admit these things because they're afraid of what other people are going to say about you. Oh, you're crazy, oh, this and that. And it's like, it's not that. And it sucks that I learn about these things now, because if I knew this when I was in school, oh my goodness, it would have saved myself so much pain, because I would understand why was it that it was so difficult for me to focus when I was in school. Or sometimes when I was working and people would talk to me and I'm looking at them and I would be like, and then I would be like, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? And they would just look at me like, bitch, you were looking straight at me. And then, so then the other thing is the OCD. The OCD is just, okay, so when people hear about OCD, right, obsessive compulsive disorder, a major thing about that is people that tend to do things repeatedly because they need to, or they feel like people who are neat freaks. There's like, oh, I have to have everything in a certain place because otherwise my OCD. And it's like, that's not what OCD is, my guy. Okay, like, only because you like things to be neat in a certain way, that doesn't make you obsessive compulsive. Like, let me tell you, having an obsessive compulsion over something is the worst thing in the world, and I honestly don't wish that upon anyone. The way that mine developed, again, it was very internal. It was nothing external. I'm not the kind of person that constantly needs to touch things or organize things. I'm not. Everything was in here, and my mind would just obsess over the smallest thing, over things that I could not control. And the fact that I couldn't control them was what made me obsessive about it. And I would constantly just pick and pick and pick and pick on those things until I then graduated into an anxiety attack, because I would become so obsessive over that thought that I would become anxious, and it was just shit rolling down the hill. You know? So I think it's very harmful for people to always say things like, oh, OCD is this one thing, or panic attacks is this one thing, or depression is this one thing. It's not. Mental health is a myriad of things that develops depending on you and your experiences and who you are as a person. So my OCD, although it is mild, it is not as bad as someone who really suffers from it is. And as of right now, I can say with some confidence that I've kind of been able to manage it and somewhat control it. The medication has helped me, so, you know, and I do find myself doing this a lot, but this is more my anxiety than anything else. Like when I'm talking, I do this a lot when I'm anxious. I like rub my hands and then they get ashy and dry and it's terrible. So what else? So yeah, so there was the OCD, the anxiety, the depression, and then the anxiety. So the anxiety, okay, so let me talk a little bit about my anxiety. So the anxiety is essentially this overwhelming feeling of being completely out of control. It was so funny because I went to my therapist one time and I was like, you know, I think I have an issue with not being able to control things. And my therapist was like, holy shit, do you think? It's funny how you come to know things about yourself and other people are like, duh. So essentially, whenever I have an anxiety attack, it's because I am currently feeling like I am spiraling out of control. My mind starts building shit in its head that is not real, that doesn't exist, that I have absolutely no proof of. It builds it until it spills out. And it feels like a constriction in my chest, like I can't breathe. So you know how you do, and you go, and when you hitch that breath up there, and that's when you feel everything in it and you let it out and it feels so good. I can't do that when I have anxiety. Or when you yawn and you breathe all the way in and you feel like your chest kind of like lets go and it feels so good. I can't do that. So because I can't do that, because I can't like catch my breath, it exacerbates the anxiety even more. Which is why breathing techniques is always something that you're always going to hear when people talk about panic attacks and anxiety attacks. Is because, I mean, when you're feeling like you're in panic, your brain goes into panic mode and it's like, oh no, something bad is happening and you can't control your body. Therefore, the breathing becomes very difficult. And then because you can't breathe, then you get into more panic because you're just like, oh my God, I can't breathe. I'm going to choke. I'm going to die. It's very dramatic. It's so dramatic. And it sucks because in the back of your head, you have that conscious voice that's telling you, you're okay. There's nothing going on. Chill. But then that little voice is not coming to the forefront because this part of your brain is just going, So I still don't know where, like how these things get triggered. I know that the word triggered is kind of like a meme on the internet, but I mean, you know, I don't have any other word to use. There are things that do cause for this feeling to start. Like if I hear anything that has to do with, the situation that I went through last year, anything that has to do with that, that's an immediate anxiety that I get. And a lot of times when I hear something or I see something that causes for my anxiety to start up, that one feels a little different. So that one, what it feels is like something just drops into the pit of my stomach. Like everything just, like my blood and everything just goes to the pit of my stomach, and it feels like I lose all sense of feeling in my face and neck and in my hands and everything, and then I get the only stomach ache, and then I have to go to the bathroom. Which is the weirdest thing, but you know, my doctor said that's actually normal. A lot of people who get anxious need to use the bathroom. So so that's another way that I get anxious, is that if I hear like bad news or something that makes me nervous or anxious, automatically. I think that that's a little bit more common though. I'm pretty sure that anyone who feels nervous or anxious about any life-changing experience or something that is different from what they're currently going through is going to have that feeling in the pit of their stomach. So that's a little bit more common. The one that's more uncommon and difficult to deal with is the breathing one, because you kind of have to just let it pass and just really center yourself and kind of really be like, listen, there really isn't anything going on. So, all right. So another note that I made was that another reason why I want to talk about this particular thing is I'm gonna go through this quick because I don't want to make these videos really long. She says as she's been talking for 25 minutes. Essentially, I want to talk about these things also because I know that in the Latin American community, these kind of conversations are never had. I'm Dominican. Living in Dominican Republic, the way that I grew up very much in a bubble, you know, very much with just like my friends and family and just a little safe, naive bubble that I lived in. And, you know, then when I started to work and meet different people, that bubble wasn't popped. It was fucking like, it blew up. And everything just came at me very quickly with absolutely no help. You know, nobody was like holding my hand telling me, oh, this is this. No. Everything just came at me one after the other. And that's a lot, you know, and I feel like a lot of the people that I grew up with experienced the same thing. You know, a lot of us grew up in very safe, naive bubbles, mainly because our parents never, you know, spoke to us straight up about the stuff that was going on in life, you know, about sex, about sexuality, about gender, none of that. You know, all that stuff was stuff that you had to kind of learn on your own, and you had to make mistakes and you had to learn from that. Or you would meet people that would tell you, oh, this and that, and you would be like, what? And you grew up, you know, with a lot of judgment, and you grew up, I mean, you grew up essentially, either you were lucky and you grew up like a normal human being without like being judgmental and stuff, or you grew up like an asshole and you were just like judging and hating everyone because you didn't know any better. And I feel like a lot of that also kind of creates that issue with mental health, because no one is equipped to deal with the reality of life on their own. You know, no one is equipped to deal with pain and growth and happiness and all that stuff alone. Like, you can't, you know. What's that saying, that humans, you're not an island? And it's the truth. But I feel like when I was growing up when a teenager and in my young 20s, I grew up pretty much alone. You know, I learned everything on my own. I didn't have anyone to tell me what was wrong and right. I kind of had to figure that out on my own. And I felt like I had a lot of missed opportunities in my life, things that I didn't do that I should have done. And then now that I'm in my 30s is kind of when all of that stuff is kind of catching up. And I think that that's pretty much the reality of a lot of people that live in Latin American countries. I mean, of course, I can't speak for other countries because I've only lived in one country. So I can only speak based off my experience in the Dominican Republic and the people that I grew up around. We all lived in that bubble of like naivete and just, you know, whatever. And then when we grew up to be the people we were. And it's no surprise that a lot of us end up having all these issues, you know, having all these issues with depression and anxiety and panic and all this stuff, because, I mean, how could you not? You know, you were never prepared for any of it. You know, you were in school. Nobody told you that once you got out of school that the reality of life was going to hit you right in the face, and you had to figure those things out on your own. So I think that one thing that I also want to take out from this series is, you know, people who live in Latin American culture, have a conversation about that, about how did it feel for you growing up, and how if you have issues with mental health and you live in a Latin American family, like how does that work for you? I'm always really interested to hear about those things. Like if you were to tell your parents, if you're a Latina or Latino or whatever, and you were to tell your parents, oh, I have depression, how would they react to that? Would they just look at you like, muchacha, tú lo que tienes hambre, or something? Or would they actually understand? Let me know in the comments below. Alright, so I'm going to leave this video here. I hope that if anyone is watching, you will share this video and comment, let me know what are your thoughts in regards to this. I will leave links on the description down below, on the description bar below, of different resources for mental health. I always do that in my videos, but this time I'm going to make it a little bit more like up front and center. You know, for any kind of assistance that you need. I will also be leaving links for different charities if anybody is interested in helping charities for mental health. And yeah, so I will be seeing you tomorrow with another video.